Tonight, stripped of all his titles and forced to leave his home. Buckingham Palace moved to distance Andrew from the royal family over sexual abuse allegations and his links to paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Two of the world's most powerful men agree a trade truce to avert a global economic crisis. But US and Chinese businesses are still paying the price, no matter what Donald Trump says.
The scale from 0 to 10, with 10 being the best, I would say the meeting was at 12.
So who are the winners and losers after these talks? And how worried should we be about Donald Trump's decision to resume nuclear testing? We'll discuss that tonight. Also coming up, hundreds of thousands affected and more than £5 billion needed for reconstruction. A report from Jamaica as the clean-up begins.
The roads are almost completely taken out here by rivers, by trees, by other debris.
And the British pro-Palestinian activist detained by ICE agents. His wife tells me he's being silenced by the Trump administration. That's all coming up on The World with me, Gillian Joseph. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. We begin with breaking news. Buckingham Palace has confirmed that Prince Andrew is to lose his royal title and leave Royal Lodge, his mansion in Windsor. He's faced scrutiny over sexual abuse allegations and his relationship with convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Tonight, Buckingham Palace said in a statement, His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles and honours of Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. His lease on Royal Lodge has to date provided him with legal protection to continue in residence. Formal notice has now been served to surrender the lease and he will move to alternative private accommodation. These censures are deemed necessary, notwithstanding the fact that he continues to deny the allegations against him. Their Majesties wish to make clear that their thoughts and utmost sympathies have been and will remain with the victims and survivors of any and all forms of abuse. Well, Sky's Molly Malone joins me now. Molly, an unexpected announcement this evening. Just how significant is this?
Yeah, massively significant, and it all happened at speed this evening. The King using his powers to act now on what has been weeks, months of accusations, allegations and controversy surrounding Andrew's royal titles and the fact that he was still living in the Royal Lodge in Windsor. All of it we know concerning allegations about his connections with the late convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. But central to the palace's statement has been victims of abuse. And we've had a statement this evening from the family of Virginia Giuffre, who died by suicide in April. She'd alleged that she had sex with Andrew as a teenager, and we've had her memoirs published recently. The statement from the family tonight saying, today an ordinary American girl from an ordinary American family brought down a British prince with her truth and extraordinary courage. Virginia Roberts Giuffre, our sister, a child when she was sexually assaulted by Andrew, never stopped fighting for accountability for what had happened to her and to countless other survivors like her. Today she declares victory. We, her family, along with her survivors' sisters, continue Virginia's battles and will not rest until the same accountability applies to all of the abusers and abettors connected to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. So if that's why they're acting, accusations, allegations from abuse victims from Virginia Giuffre, just in terms of what's happened, two significant things. Firstly, Andrew has lost his title as a prince, and that's happening with immediate effect. He'll be known now as Andrew Mountbatten of Windsor, basically, in effect, being an ordinary person, apart from, of course, being the brother of the King. We know that he gave up his Duke of York title earlier in the month, but clearly the accusations and allegations have continued, and the King felt that he needed to go further and act as he has this evening. We also know that he'll leave Royal Lodge in Windsor. We understand that's going to happen as soon as practically is possible, and we know instead he'll be going to the Sandringham estate in Norfolk, though it's not clear exactly in what capacity. Clearly, the King earlier in the week being heckled at a cathedral in Lichfield. The palace will be keen to be showing that they're in touch with public perception, in touch with public opinion, and going that bit further this evening to act in the way that they have.
Molly, thank you so much. Let's focus now on the meeting of two strongmen. They lead the world's two biggest economies. Their tit-for-tat tariffs have threatened to upend the global economy. Both Xi Jinping and Donald Trump headed home claiming victory. But if you cut through the noise, well, nothing much has changed. Beijing has agreed a temporary pause of restrictions on rare earth exports. Those are the vital minerals needed to make everything from fighter jets to electric cars. Washington says China will buy large amounts of soybeans from US farmers. And in turn, Donald Trump has agreed to reduce tariffs he introduced because of China's role in manufacturing ingredients used to make the drug fentanyl. More concerning is the US president's suggestion that his country would resume nuclear testing for the first time in 30 years to match the actions of China and Russia. Have a listen.
They seem to all be nuclear testing. We have more nuclear weapons than anybody. We don't do testing. You know, we've halted it many years ago. But with others doing testing, I think it's appropriate that we do also.
President of the People's Republic of China.
Just a few months ago, this would have felt impossible. Two leaders, two strong men, two very different styles.
But he's a very tough negotiator. That's not good.
A power play perhaps, but one that didn't seem to land.
We know each other well.
Because this is not a relationship where Trump holds all the power. In a small room, they spoke big politics, how to lower the temperature on a trade war that at its worst ground almost all business to a halt. And there are clear attempts to endear.
I always believe that China's development goes hand in hand with your vision to make America great again.
After they seemed buoyed up by what they'd achieved. Agreements on rare earths, tariffs and the purchase of soybeans. A commitment to keep talking on chips and the war in Ukraine. Trump lauding success.
We have, it was an outstanding group of decisions, I think, that was made. A lot of decisions were made. Well, I guess on the scale of from 0 to 10, with 10 being the best, I would say the meeting was a 12.
Trump's tour of Asia is now over. It's China's turn for diplomacy here. Outside, a staged welcome party of expat Chinese chanted to welcome their leader. But the people had clearly been told not to speak.
Sorry.
Interviews swiftly interrupted.
Why is it not okay? I'm only asking why they've come.
Even out here, control of the narrative is king.
There's clearly been a recognition on both sides that a degree of stabilisation was necessary. The fact there's been progress on such a wide range of issues clearly speaks to that. But there are real questions about how deep that progress runs. There are still more barriers to trade than there were at the beginning of the year. And that's not to mention the raft of deep political and structural disagreements that weren't even touched on today. For two leaders who have both staked their reputations on being strong and unyielding, there is every chance the next stumbling block could bring this all tumbling down.
Those close to China's government say all this is underpinned by a new sense of confidence. Matching strength with strength is working.
We know that situation is, of course, it's bad, it's difficult, but we also know there is a limit of power of the United States. China is more willing to take the risk because we think the foundation of the China's long-term development is in China, not out of China.
There is still a tension in this relationship and a hyper-vigilance too. That will likely last longer than anything agreed today. Helen Ann Smith, Sky News in Busan, South Korea.
And we'll speak to Helen Ann in just a moment. But first, where does the meeting leave trade between the world's two largest economies? Our business and economics correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan, has been taking a look.
It's the latest twist in the US-China trading relationship, but it's worth taking stock of just how we got here. This is what Donald Trump's been up to since coming into power the second time round. You can see that within months of coming into office, he was ramping up tariffs on China, first with that 10% broad-based tariff to punish them for their role in the fentanyl trade. That was then increased to 20%. And by spring, you can see things had reached boiling point, a tit-for-tat trade war. This was in the midst of Liberation Day. You might remember when Trump announced tariffs on countries across the world. China hit back. The US tariff was hitting about 145%, both countries effectively deciding to stop trading with each other. Tempers calmed. Behind the scenes, both sides have been trying to figure out a long-lasting deal, but then at the beginning of the month, well, things flared up again. China announced export controls on rare earth elements that are critical for modern-day manufacturing. Trump threatened them with an additional 100% tariff. Well, we've heard today that again, things have calmed down, talks have gone well, and Trump actually announced that he would reduce that 20% fentanyl tariff to 10%. So that's where we're at now. But as you can see, the state of things, the average tariffs are still higher than they were at the beginning of the year. And we can see how the new baseline has shifted in this next chart as well, how the new normal has shifted. In his first presidency, Trump was very much focused on targeted tariffs on things like electricals, solar panels, and steel. These are kind of the amount of goods that are under the purview of tariffs. Biden didn't really change things too much, but nor did he row back. And then second time round, where you can see Trump has ratcheted things up. Now everything is subject to a tariff. We're at 100%. When we talk about tariffs, as we know, this isn't all about tariffs. It's also about export controls. And here, rare earth elements is something, as I mentioned, China is really weaponizing. The US, for their part, can control computer chips and the export of computer chips to China, particularly NVIDIA's AI chips. Trump said that there hadn't been much movement on that. He'd leave it to NVIDIA and the Chinese to sort out. And then, of course, TikTok, the sale of the American arm of TikTok. Still no clearer on that yet. So many questions still to answer.
In a moment, we'll hear from our US correspondent, James Matthews. But first to Helen Ann Smith, who's in Busan in South Korea. And Helen Ann, both men went home claiming a win. But who came out of this meeting in the strongest position?
I think that's a really difficult question to answer. Of course, it depends a little bit on what degree of pain and what degree of restriction you're willing to stomach. I think both came out with things that were really, really important to them. From the US perspective, their agreements for China to do more to crack down on the flow of fentanyl, that's politically really important. Economically, though, it all comes down to that rare earth minerals, those crucial elements that are used for the development of everything from AI to high-level weaponry. The fact that that might start flowing again a bit, that's extremely important. From the Chinese side, the lowering of tariffs, of course, is important, but they actually will have cared a lot about the fact that some restrictions on companies that have been blacklisted by the US were eased a little bit. That would have been very important from the Chinese. But look, if you take a step back, especially if you want to try and assess who's winning, if you like, who came out of this better, I think there's two sort of really important points to make. Firstly, I think the Chinese position is so significantly stronger now than it was during Trump's first term. And I think we've seen throughout this trade war, and particularly throughout these negotiations, a real willingness to use that power. A lot of that power comes down to one very key trump card they have, for want of a better term, and that is that rare earths industry that we were talking about. It is so crucial to American development, and China controls the vast majority of the world's supply, and they have shown throughout this process that they are willing to use that to leverage absolute maximum power. And I think it speaks really clearly to this developing Chinese confidence. I think over the past few months and few years, the economic development we've seen here, the technological development, the fact that they went through an iteration of this during Trump's first term, there is just this new renewed confidence. And I think the China-US geopolitical relationship more broadly now is at least being conducted from a position of parity, perhaps even from a position of Chinese power and ascendancy, perhaps. It's worth saying as well that that kind of strength, that power, that confidence, that sort of matching of Trump's unpredictability, that matching of Trump's maximum pressure playbook means that I think all of this does have the potential to come tumbling down at some point, perhaps. They might keep on some sort of truce until the start of next year when Trump says he will visit China. But look, as and when more difficult, thorny political issues come up that they didn't even touch on yesterday, it's hard to see how these two strong men are willing to walk back from these positions where they've wanted to be seen as unyielding.
Well, James, Donald Trump now back in Washington, and there's been some alarm over his comments over nuclear weapons testing. What exactly is the president proposing?
Yeah, hi, Gillian. He was on his way, actually, to meet President Xi just minutes before they came together. He posted on Truth Social that America was going to start testing our nuclear weapons. Now, from an erratic and unpredictable president, any talk of anything to do with nuclear weapons sets hairs running. The question, of course, is why did he say that? Why did he say it then? And what exactly does he mean? I have to tell you, Gillian, there's no hard answer to any of those questions. It's not clear if Donald Trump is referring to the testing of nuclear explosives, the warheads, or the missiles that carry those warheads. That talk of other countries testing programs, he said that he wanted America equal to them. Well, the Russians have responded because they did conduct tests in the past couple of weeks, but they say these were tests not of actual nuclear weapons. The Kremlin saying we didn't know that anybody was testing. They're saying that essentially they were testing the delivery systems for nuclear warheads. Nobody has conducted explosive nuclear testing apart from North Korea. That was in 2017. The last time the Americans did it was 1992, China 1996. So it is all starting to sound a little bit Cold War, especially when you put that together with vast sums being spent on nuclear arms capability. What did Donald Trump, or why did he mention it when he did? He clearly felt it was an occasion for saber-rattling deterrence, shaping a context, I think, that carried a reminder to the Chinese and others of America's superpower status. It carries with it, of course, that implicit threat, which is the danger, of course. Where does this road end?
James and Helen Ann, thank you both. You're watching The World, still to come. We'll go live to Jamaica as the Prime Minister describes total destruction across the island nation. We hear from the wife of a British activist detained in the US, where officials have accused him of supporting terrorism.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
What country are you
From the UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
I'm Stephen Murphy and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Welcome back. Let's return to those talks between the leaders of China and the USA today. I'm joined now by former Deputy Assistant to President Trump for International Economic Affairs, Kellyanne Shaw. Welcome to you. First of all, President Trump has given these talks a 12 out of 10 in terms of success. Do you agree with that estimation?
Well, you know, the president likes to talk in generalities in terms of the way that he evaluates his meetings. And certainly having seen him engage with a number of world leaders back in Trump 1.0, I can tell you that that sort of remark indicates how well he thought the interaction went between him and President Xi. But ultimately, this wasn't a grand trade deal. This was about managing critical supply chains between the United States and China. And I think when you have two superpowers who are both competing to be number one, this was probably about as good as the president could have done in terms of resolving some of the issues on the table.
It sounds like you don't think he achieved his primary goal exactly.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I think that the issue is that the United States and China are going in two separate directions. And there isn't really a scenario in my mind in the medium to long term where the United States and China improve their trading relationship. I think right now this is about managing the relationship, making sure that it's not worse than it needs to be. And clearly when it comes to these critical sectors like rare earths, which we need just to operate our cars and our military, things like fentanyl, which is the #1 killer of Americans, and export controls on chips and semiconductors, these are real national security imperatives. And that was really what the White House was set out to do, was to manage this relationship and this competition with China.
So what exactly has been achieved? What would you say is the most significant outcome from these talks?
Well, I think from the U.S. perspective, getting China to back down from its attempt to control the entire technology global supply chain with these rare earth export control licensing regimes, that was the top priority of the administration. I do think getting fentanyl was a bit of a cherry on top. I don't think there was a lot of expectation on the U.S. side going into these talks that that was something that China was going to entertain, because they had been effectively intransigent about this issue for the past 6 or 7 years. Now, there were some other things that were part of this deal, and I think we'll see more details next week when they release either a joint fact sheet or some sort of joint statement, like TikTok was in there, resolution of shipbuilding is in there, and a few other issues, but clearly rare earths was priority #1.
There was great enthusiasm, as I've alluded to, from Trump, but not so much from Xi Jinping, certainly not the body language, at least. And there's no formal agreement, as you've said. President Trump has said a trade deal will be signed pretty soon.
Right. So for the past several months, both sides, the United States and China, have been working on a text, which they call this framework agreement. So the two sides do have a document, but that document has not been made public. I think instead what they're likely to issue are some sort of joint statement or fact sheet on like the key building blocks that were achieved in this meeting in Korea. But Xi Jinping, that is the way he is in almost every setting. I wouldn't necessarily read too much into it. I think the president is much more emotive in his body body language. But clearly this seemed to be a good outcome on both sides, because if you read the Chinese state media or the press coming out of MOFCOM, it's glowing about how well this meeting went. So both sides felt like they got something out of it.
And do you believe that using tariffs as a weapon has been effective? Because the threats have been so erratic that, you know, some countries are thinking that they know that it's going to be very high one day and it could be reduced the next. Has that been an effective means of negotiation in your estimation?
Well, it depends who you're negotiating with and what you're negotiating for. I think there is some interest in the United States in just increasing the average U.S. tariff rate across the board. That's why we have this 10 to 15% baseline tariff, including with the United Kingdom, who's one of our closest friends and allies. But when it comes to China, these threats of 100 and some odd plus percent have been what has brought China to the negotiating table in now at least 2 instances to try to resolve some of the underlying issues, which is really about this rare earths. China does not want a trade embargo by virtue of high tariffs. It's not good for China's economy. So that is one of the things that has brought them to the table to negotiate. And that's why we've seen the president move some of those rates down when he's been able to get what he wanted.
But what does it do for diplomatic relations, do you think?
With China? I mean,
yes, generally with all countries.
Well, again, it depends who you're negotiating with and what you're negotiating for. I mean, when you think about it, like take a country like Brazil, whose average tariff rate is 11.8% compared to the US's, which before January was something closer to 2.5%, 3%. Raising US tariffs on Brazil to effectively match theirs shouldn't destabilize diplomatic relations. And the same is true with many major U.S. trading partners who had much higher tariffs than the United States did. But when you're trading with somebody like Europe or the UK, who again, those rates are closer to the United States, of course, those allies don't like it, but this is the difference between walking and chewing gum at the same time. We can address some of our trade issues through tariffs as a way to mutually bring trade restrictions down while also addressing some of our national security and other priorities at the same time.
Is there a real movement on the rare earth minerals exports? Because it's only a temporary pause that's been agreed by China, isn't it?
Yeah, China, according to press reports, has agreed to a 1-year suspension. And this is something where it's trust but verify. The devil's in the details. China has not proven itself to be that trustworthy in terms of some of the promises and commitments that it's made to the United States over the course of the last several years, including that phase 1 agreement, which they very clearly did not live up to. So I will be watching closely. I hope the administration will be as well, to see if China actually does what it said it's going to do.
OK, Kellyanne Shaw, thank you very much for speaking to us, former Deputy Assistant to President Trump for International Economic Affairs. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Jamaica's Prime Minister says there is total destruction across the island nation after it was hit by the strongest storm in its recorded history. The number of casualties is expected to rise as officials describe devastating scenes in the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa, with communities cut off and areas completely flattened. Martha Kellner joins us now from St Elizabeth in Jamaica. And as we've heard, quotes from the Prime Minister, total devastation. Martha, what have you seen? What are you experiencing now?
Yeah, total devastation is pretty spot on. I'm in the town of Lacovia in western Jamaica, and almost every house here has been damaged, many completely damaged. What you're looking at now is a church which is 350 years old, those beautiful stained glass windows, a real source of pride for this town. Well, now it is completely hollowed out, the roof completely removed. And what I'm feeling from speaking to people here is just an utter sense of desperation. My team and I landed in Kingston, the capital of Jamaica, on the east of the island late this morning. We've been steadily making our way further west to the worst affected areas, and it's been very difficult to get to. You know, a lot of the roads blocked by fallen trees, by other debris, and everyone I come across is telling me, you know, I've lost my home entirely, or I've lost my roof, and they're really, really desperate for help. I've just been speaking to a group of people who took refuge during the storm in a primary school over here. They were on the bottom floor of that primary school, and they were given by authorities before this storm hit just a tarpaulin sheet to protect themselves from a Category 5 storm. They're now without food or water. They said that it's been 2 days since the hurricane hit. They've not seen any sign of the authorities or of emergency services. And I have to say, I was surprised by how few sirens I've been hearing. Usually when you come to these sort of disaster zones, as I've done with my team countless times before, you hear lots of sirens. Here, nothing. There is no assistance. And as we were driving along this road, I came across one lady who was holding a sign and it said shelter, help needed. I stopped to speak to her. Her name is Cherie McLeod. This is what she had to say.
It is heartbreaking. I never thought in a million years that I would be in this situation trying to get help, and with little to no communication. We can't reach no officials, no emergency teams. The best help we have received after the hurricane is from security personnel from the Lacovia police station who tried to get us medical assistance, but to date nobody has come because they too are flooded. They have lost their homes, and we're just not sure what to expect from this. But it feels like a total reset to us right now, a total reset. And I'm hoping and praying that help can reach us soon, especially the persons who are between ages 72 to 86. I don't have any medical experience. The task of a shelter manager is voluntary, and the most I can do is just ask for help in whatever way we possibly can.
Sounds like you're doing your very, very best for these people. You have elderly people inside the shelter, some of them unwell.
Very unwell now, and that's why we need any form of medical assistance now. I know for one of my shelterees she's the oldest. Since the incident, she has been totally out of it. She's not speaking, but however, if we try to communicate with her, then she will make, but it shows you the level of trauma that she has underwent, because
how bad was it here, if you can encompass it in words?
It was very terrible. So they were using the bottom half of this building. They had to evacuate during the hurricane. They had to flee the bottom half of this shelter and go over to the block B of the school. And they have to be taking turns. So when the wind is on that side, they have to come to the front. When the wind is on the front of the building, they have to be going to the back. So all their clothes and blankets that they were provided with all got damaged. So they have to be sunning them now in order to. So they were out of bedding, proper beddings. So they have to be sleeping on desks and tables, and some sitting in chairs just to get a sleep.
Some people are sleeping in chairs.
In chairs. In chairs.
So basically all you've got is a roof and...
Just a roof, and that's it.
Cherie, that lady you heard from there, is a volunteer. She is volunteering her time and her efforts to try and look after those people, ranging in ages in that shelter between 14 years old and 86. She actually took me inside that shelter, and it is fairly desperate conditions inside. She mentioned there some people have mattresses that they managed to drag here from their homes in the neighbouring towns and villages, but some people are sleeping either in wooden chairs or on top of wooden desks that would usually be used by children inside that primary school. She says they are desperate for food and water. We said, obviously, we will do what we can for help. We'll try and get the word out about the conditions they're in at the moment. But I guess the thing I've been so struck by driving here from Kingston is just how wide the field of damage is here. You know, town upon town where children are playing outside homes with no roofs. I've driven past petrol stations where, you know, people are queuing. Presumably it will take hours for them to get hold of petrol to try go somewhere to get food and water to bring back to their families. And you can see there is a steady stream of traffic now coming past. This road leads to the town of Black River, about 20 minutes drive from here. And Black River is being referred to by authorities as ground zero for this hurricane. But I think if you asked people in Lacovia, they would say that they feel like they're at ground zero too.
Martha, thank you. Just a desperate situation there in Jamaica. More now on that breaking news tonight. Buckingham Palace has confirmed that Prince Andrew is to lose his royal title and leave Royal Lodge, his mansion in Windsor. He's faced scrutiny over sexual abuse allegations and his relationship with convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Tonight, Buckingham Palace said in a statement, His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles and honours of Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. His lease on Royal Lodge has, to date, provided him with legal protection to continue in residence. Formal notice has now been served to surrender the lease and he will move to alternative private accommodation. These censures are deemed necessary, notwithstanding the fact that he continues to deny the allegations against him. Their Majesties wish to make clear that their thoughts and utmost sympathies have been and will remain with the victims and survivors of any and all forms of abuse. Our royal correspondent Laura Bundock is at Buckingham Palace for us this evening. And Laura, was this inevitable?
Well, this certainly is a remarkable and radical moment for the royal family, and it seems that Andrew's fall from grace is perhaps finally complete, stripped of absolutely everything, the titles, the home. It is a very unusual moment. The King's own brother now no longer a prince. And although Andrew has always denied all the allegations, the accusations simply wouldn't go away. And I think all his associations were starting to create a real risk to the reputation of the royal family, from his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein to his associations with alleged Chinese spy, and much more recently, the posthumous publication of his accuser, Virginia Giuffre's memoir. Interestingly, tonight from her family, a strong statement saying that an ordinary American girl from an ordinary American family brought down a British prince with her truth and extraordinary courage. They talk about this as being a moment of her victory. This piling pressure, all of these things, were starting, frankly, to overshadow the work of the wider royal family. Prince William, the Prince of Wales, is due in Brazil next week for his Earthshot Prize, and it's clear enough was enough. Now, the royal family, Prince William himself, supported the King, but it was the King's ultimate decision, backed by his family. Andrew, as he is now to be known, is going to leave Royal Lodge, that huge home he's leased from the Crown Estate all these years on the Windsor Estate. He's leaving the home. His ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, with whom he shared the home and that very unconventional relationship, will be making her own arrangements. Andrew will soon move to the King's private Norfolk estate, Sandringham, most famous for those royal family traditional Christmas gatherings. He'll be paid for now completely by the King. His two daughters, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, they keep those titles, but Andrew will very soon be starting what is in effect a life in exile in Norfolk on the Sandringham estate. But this is all a very formal process and has been carried out and will continue to be carried out with all the official authorities here. The government, though, does support the decision taken. It will not have been easy for the King, but I think he simply could not ignore public opinion. The outrage over all of these headlines, the anger directed at Andrew was never going to stop, and it was only the King ultimately who had the power and the authority to do what he has done. I mean, Andrew for years enjoyed the perks and privileges of his position. He has now paid the final price.
Laura, thank you. Donald Trump's second term has been marked by an aggressive crackdown on people entering the United States, with arrests by ICE officers averaging more than 1,000 each day. The approach has been controversial and has even seen foreign nationals detained, despite having valid documents to be in the country. Well, this week, the British political commentator Sami Habdi was arrested by US immigration officers who revoked his visa and banned him from completing his speaking tour, while accusing him of supporting terrorism and undermining national security. I spoke to his wife, Sumaya, and began by asking her how she found out her husband was detained by ICE.
I had tried to call him that afternoon and it rang a couple of times and then cut off. So I just assumed that maybe he was doing an interview, because if he's live on air, that's usually what he'll do. And then I got a text message from a friend who said, "Is it true that Sami's been abducted by ICE?" So I said, I mean, my heart dropped instantly. Like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? So I immediately called his agent and he confirmed it. And I managed to speak to Sami for the first time yesterday, and he told me that they wouldn't allow him to tell anyone that he was about to be taken. And he really had to plead with them. And they said, well, OK, you can send a text message. So he sent a text message to the head of care in California, one of the senior figures of care, Hossam Ailouche. And it was one of the ICE officers who hung me up, actually. Sami said, "That's my wife calling. Can I just pick up and tell her what's going on?" He said no, and he hung up and switched off the phone. And it feels really unfair because Sami hasn't done anything wrong. He was there on a valid visa. His visa hasn't expired. It wasn't due to expire. He'd already been allowed to enter the country. He was taking a domestic flight. So he was already allowed in a few days before that. And I really truly think, and actually I think most people will agree, that he has been targeted because he's been speaking up for Palestinian rights.
What were your first thoughts when you realised that he had been detained, and the reasons?
We kind of were worried. You know, we've been watching what's been happening this year in the United States, and we've seen that people with pro-Palestinian platforms have been detained. If you look at the case of Mahmoud Khalil, it's probably one of the most high-profile cases. And Sami's profile has risen considerably because he's such an effective speaker. He truly believes in human rights. He truly believes in you know, there shouldn't be any hatred towards Muslims or Jews or Christians or anyone of any faith. He really believes that with everything that he does. And so he's gaining rising popularity has put him on the radar of some really unsavoury far-right influences. And he was atted by them a few days before this happened, and he did mention it to me, and we were concerned. The United States government has not provided a reason as to why they're detaining him. Now, they're saying that his visa was revoked, possibly a couple of days before on the Friday, and this happened on the Sunday, but they didn't inform him, and he only found out when an ICE officer told him, your visa's been revoked, so you've got to come back with us.
Well, as regards the reason for Sami's detention given by the US State Department is that, and I quote, "those who support terrorism and undermine American national security will not be allowed to work or visit this country."
It's outrageous. It's completely outrageous and baseless. Sami's been criticising a foreign government. He hasn't been criticising the United States. He's been criticising Israel.
The State Department also posted a video of your husband speaking after the October the 7th attacks. And we don't have the full context of the comments, that is true, but he's heard asking members of the audience whether they felt euphoria. And the actual clip says, "How many of you feel it in your hearts when you got the news that it happened? How many of you felt euphoria?" What are your thoughts on the suggestion that that is inciting violence and it is a terrorist statement to make?
This clip that you're referring to, Gillian, is a selection of clips that have been spliced and then fit together and presented as one video. He's on record on the Thinking Muslim podcast shortly after the October 7th attacks saying, "We do not support or celebrate bloodshed or bloodlust. We do not celebrate death. We do not celebrate war."
What do you want to see happen next? Have you appealed for help from the British government?
Yes, I immediately filed a case with the Foreign Commonwealth Office. If I'm being completely honest, Gillian, they haven't been much help. What they've been able to tell me is that they don't know very much. They've told me that the US authorities are refusing to give them the reason as to why he's being detained, because he is being detained. Sammy's more than happy to come home. You know, he'd happily get on the next flight. Why are they keeping him there? If his visa's been revoked, let him come. What's the problem? He's a British citizen. His family are all here.
Your message to the US authorities?
The United States prides itself on its First Amendment, the right to freedom of speech, the right to freedom of political expression. This is enshrined and is the most valued right that the United States, and I think even the United Kingdom, as their ally, we both share this in common. And what we're seeing is really worrying. And I think the United States needs to just let Sammy go and recognise that they have made a huge error here, because he hasn't done anything wrong. He's not guilty of any crime. All he's done is speak up in support of Palestinian rights, which, if I may add, is even more important today.
Well, in a statement, Department of Homeland Security spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin says following the October the 7th terror attack, Sami Hamdi cheered on Hamas. Under President Trump, those who support terrorism and undermine American national security will not be allowed to work or visit this country. That's just common sense. This is The World. Next up, a new series tries to get closer to the human realities of what happened on October the 7th. We'll hear from an actress starring in Red Alert and the show's producer.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest and Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island.
The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe. Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out.
The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here. In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
Gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
What country are you
From the UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Welcome back. The horrifying events of the October the 7th Hamas attack and the war in Gaza that followed have been well documented. But a new series tries to get closer to the human realities of what happened that night. Red Alert is centred around ordinary people in southern Israel as they struggle to survive while telling the story of the broader conflict from both sides. Batsheva Yahalomi is an Israeli survivor of the Hamas attack, whose story is told in the series. On October the 7th, Hamas stormed into her house and took her husband and son to Gaza as hostages, while she managed to escape with her 2 daughters. I spoke to the actress who portrays Batsheva, Rotem Seller, and the producer of the series, Lawrence Bender.
It all happened while I was safe in my home in Los Angeles, as I watched in horror what happened on TV. But I have many friends and family, not family, but people who are like my family, I should say, that are there. Then I went to see, a small group of us went to the Simon Wiesenthal Center, actually the Museum of Tolerance, and watched these 42 minutes of footage. And it's footage I don't even want to describe on air because it's so horrific and savage what actually happened. And the world just didn't understand that what happened to everyday people in their families. What's it like to have a terrorist show up in your living room, and what they did to people is just horrific. And you know, if we're going to get to a place where we all want peace, we want people to live together and peacefully live together. But it has to be acknowledged why we got here in the first place.
And Rotem, what attracted you to this project?
As an Israeli Jewish actress, it's maybe the essence of why I went to this career, to be an actress, you know, to tell the world true stories.
Tell us about the character that you play, Batsheva Yahalomi.
Batsheva and her family used to live in Nir Oz, kibbutz Nir Oz, which is in the south. She's a mother of 3 children, sweet children, and was married to Ohad. And they had this lovely life, a lovely family life that was all got cut and burned at October 7th, when terrorists came into their home and murdered Ohad and kidnapped Batsheva and her 3 kids to Gaza. I don't know if I could do spoilers, but on the way to Gaza, the motorcycle that Batsheva and her 2 daughters were on fell. So she managed to escape and return to the kibbutz. And Eitan, her little son, was moving on to Gaza and was kidnapped. It's a horrible story, really. One of thousands here in Israel.
And Lawrence, how did you decide which stories to cover, which stories to tell?
That's a really good question, because as Rotem said, there are literally thousands of stories. And so I would say a couple of things. First of all, from my point of view as an American, I made this show. Of course, I want the Israelis to be happy with it, and I want them, you know, they're the hometown people. But I made this movie for the show for the world to see. And so I wanted to have a global appeal. And so what are the things that make it global? What can we all relate to? Most of us have family. Most of us relate to family. Most of us relate to being an underdog. So first of all, I wanted, and all of us wanted to involve with the creation of the show to show everyday families being affected by this brutal thing that happened. So we have a husband trying to save his wife, a mother going off to save her son, We have Jeffrey Epstein, played Ratam, mother and a father of kids. We have an Arab man whose wife, a pregnant wife, was murdered. These are all true stories, and he's got this little infant that he's got to hold while the terrorists are nearby. And if that baby cries, they're gonna get murdered, and he's got to hide and somehow keep his baby from crying. And then in all of this, he goes and sees that the IDF is showing up, the Israeli Defense Force, and he goes out against the possibility of killing himself being murdered. He saves these IDF people. So we have these incredible, incredible stories of every day. And what we get wrong here in Hollywood is, we cast these beautiful looking people as superheroes, right? Whether it's a man or a woman, they could run the 100 meters in 9 seconds flat. But the real superheroes are the people that we have in our show, ordinary, everyday people.
Before we go, a reminder of that breaking news tonight. Buckingham Palace has confirmed that the King's brother, Andrew, is to lose his royal title and leave Royal Lodge, his mansion in Windsor. He's faced scrutiny over sexual abuse allegations and his relationship with convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. The King has initiated the formal process to remove Prince from his title, and he will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The announcement has been welcomed by the family of the late Virginia Giuffre, who accused Andrew of sexual assault, which he has repeatedly denied. Her family says an ordinary American girl from an ordinary American family brought down a British prince with her truth and extraordinary courage. Sky News understands Andrew will now move to a property on the private Sandringham estate in Norfolk, with his future accommodation being privately funded by the King.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin. The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks. If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.